Hello, I'm Ari Altstedter with Bloomberg News, and we're very lucky to have Romy Bowers here today, who's the head of CMHC. And it's a perfect time to be talking to Romy because the housing market is on every Canadian's mind. On the one hand, we have major economists from the country's major banks saying we're in the midst of a historic price correction. On the other hand, we have politicians across the country saying we're in a affordability crisis when it comes to the cost of shelter. So it seems to be a lot of mixed messages going on in the country, and thankfully we have Romy Bowers here to help us sort them through. So thank you, Romy, and welcome. And I think we'll just get started. My first question is what is your and CMHC's outlook for the housing market right now?
Thanks so much, Ari, and it's a real pleasure to be here. It is absolutely true that housing affordability is really top of mind for many Canadians. With respect to our housing outlook, earlier this year, we had estimated housing price declines nationally of about 5%. This was based on certain assumptions about interest rate increases. We've seen that inflation has been more persistent than we had originally anticipated, and the Bank of Canada is taking more aggressive action. So we're in the process of revising our forecast, which is going to be released a little bit later in October, and we're revising our forecast from 5% decrease year over year to between 10 and 15%. So that'll be released very shortly. And it's very important when you're thinking about these price decreases to think about the rapid, sort of unsustainable levels of house price increases that occurred during the pandemic. So there has been a decline, but you have to put it into context. And maybe if I could add, there's a lot of focus on house price declines and some of the sort of the short-term impacts that interest rates have had. But from our perspective, what's really important to remember is that we believe that there's a very significant supply shortage in Canada, and there is a significant demand that is being unfulfilled. And in our view, the supply-demand mismatch is what's going to sustain the housing market in the long term.
This is very interesting, and I do want to get to that later. But first, whenever interest rates go up as fast as they have been, and prices decline as fast as they have been, start to get fears about some distress emerging in the market, some borrowers getting into trouble, some people who own homes being forced to sell those homes. Is this something CMHC is concerned about? What forms of distress do you see playing out as we adjust to this very rapid market shift?
CMHC is, obviously always very concerned about the housing market. It's our job to monitor it and make sure that we provide the best analysis for Canadians. With respect to distress, I think what's really important to remember is what causes losses for mortgage lenders is increases in unemployment. To date, the employment picture in Canada has been very strong. So despite the interest rate increases, we don't see signs of distress in our mortgage book. So, we are still monitoring the situation very closely, and we recognize that the impact that interest rate increases are having on the pocketbooks of Canadians. But what we're watching for are job losses and the impact that would have on the housing system.
And in the meantime, is CMHC planning any reaction to the changes in the housing market? I mean, ideas have been floated or changes to the stress test and other things. I was wondering if there's any actions CMHC has in the offing.
So with respect to the housing market, there's a couple of different aspects to it. We've seen, we're always calling for additional housing supply, and what we've seen has been a real pullback in the development pipeline. CMHC does actually a lot of financing for housing providers, and we are seeing that some of the projects that we were supporting are no longer viable. So we're trying to use the financial authorities we have to keep the construction pipeline going. So that's one thing we're doing. Secondly, from a more affordability perspective, the government of Canada is taking action to support households most in need. So you may have seen recently that there was a $500 one-time top-up to the Canada Housing Benefit for very low-income Canadians, and CMHC is working with CRA to roll that out. In addition to that, under the National Housing Strategy, we have what's called the Rapid Housing Initiative, and it's meant to create housing, very quickly for those Canadians who are at risk of homelessness. So we're in the process of launching the third round of that, and we hope that actions like this can support Canadians most in need.
Is the stress test something that's being looked at in terms of reaction?
Reaction, yeah. So in terms of the soundness of the financial system, one of the things we worry about is the level of indebtedness of Canadians. We house prices have been sort of decoupled from income increases for many, many years, and Canadians have taken on a lot of debt to basically finance their home purchases. So we are concerned that that there is a vulnerability in the financial system, that interest rate increases will aggravate that. Having said that, I think there's been some very wise policy decisions made during the last 10 years that really have strengthened the financial system. Since the 2008 crisis, there's been increases in bank capital levels, underwriting practices across the financial institutions have been strengthened. And I view the stress test as being a very good policy tool in providing resiliency to the system. So, I think it's not CMHC's decision to make. I know that my colleagues at OSFI and the Department of Finance are monitoring that. But I think changes to the stress test have to be considered in light of the fragility of the system and ensuring that the actions that we've taken to strengthen it remain in place.
You mentioned that there's been a pullback in new home construction as a result to the market changes, and that CMHC is taking steps to address that and keep up that pace. The government has a very ambitious target of raising new home construction to 400,000 units per year. There has been some sort of doubt thrown on that by experts and various people in the industry. I'm curious to hear your response to that. Is that goal achievable?
There's no doubt that doubling our housing starts is very difficult. But that doesn't make it any less desirable. And we absolutely have to work on really transforming the creation of housing supply in Canada. Earlier this year, CMHC actually quantified the number of housing that we need in Canada to meet demand of Canadians and restore some level of affordability. And the number is huge. It's 3.5 million houses. And it was the first time we quantified the amount of need. And what we're really calling for is for all orders of government, but most importantly, the private sector, who are responsible for 95% of the housing supply creation in Canada, to really look at what is preventing the supply response. We have an open market housing system, and when demand is so high, there should be a supply response, but that supply response is not happening. So we have to really, as a country, take a look at that and take actions really urgently to address that issue.
I mean, some of the bottlenecks that developers point to are very concrete ones. Shortages of materials right now, shortages of labor. There's not enough people to swing the hammers and fit the pipes.
Yes.
How can we address those problems specifically?
With respect to, there has been a lot of inflationary impacts on materials. We saw that even during the pandemic. I think that last year there was like a 20% increase in construction costs across Canada. It's pretty significant. And in addition to that, we have a shortage of skilled trades in Canada. Many people in the skilled trades are retiring, and we're not providing new workers fast enough. So we need to take action on that front as well. Overall, I really think that there needs to be a sort of a stepping up of innovation and higher productivity in the construction sector. And I know when I talk to industry leaders that they're very eager and willing to take steps, but I think the government needs to provide support to foster greater innovation and productivity. And I know this is happening at the provincial levels. I know there's many programs to encourage more young people to enter the skilled trades. Unfortunately, many of these actions take time, but I think we need to have a renewed focus on productivity, innovation, and really encouraging people to enter the skilled trades. And I think it's only by doing that in a very concerted way that we can address this challenge.
Right. And another major obstacle that many housing experts point to, many policymakers point to in why we're not building enough housing, why we haven't been building enough housing in Canada for the last decade, has been local opposition, political opposition at the municipal level. And ultimately, in Canada, it's municipalities that have the say over what gets built, where it gets built, and how high a building gets built. Do you have any thoughts on how to overcome that kind of opposition, sort of not in my backyard political opposition, to achieve the government's ambitious home building goal?
Yeah, you're absolutely right in that many of the supply levers are at the local level, and it's a real challenge for the federal government to be, sort of constructive in this space. There are a couple of initiatives that maybe I'd like to maybe just highlight for you. In the last budget, there was a program announced. It's called the Housing Accelerator Fund, and it's a $4 billion commitment by the federal government to incent municipalities to break down some of those barriers to supply creation. So we're hoping to, we're in the process of designing that program. We hope that this incentive will provide municipalities with the support to break down the local level barriers that do exist to supply creation. So, this funding could be used to, accelerate permitting processes, to modernize planning processes. It could also be used to educate maybe local residents about the benefits of more density in their communities, more transit-oriented development. So we're very hopeful that this program will be launched fairly shortly, and that will be useful for municipalities. And CMHC, as Canada's National Housing Agency, also has a role in providing greater information to municipalities, provinces, territories, so they can have a better conversation with local residents about how we can create communities that are truly inclusive and that really prepares Canada for the 21st century. In some ways, the supply shortage, it sounds like a bad thing, but it's because Canada's growing and that our economy is so vibrant. It's a good news story. People want to live in Canada. Our population has housing needs, and I think we really need to step up to address that.
And the last point I want to touch on is affordability. This is something top of mind for many Canadians, for many politicians right now. And I want to, given the decline in prices that we've seen in Canada, home prices the last little while, do you see this problem getting better, or is it getting worse because of the rise in interest rates?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I feel that correcting the supply-demand imbalance is the best way to restore affordability. I know prices have declined, but the interest rate increases have really offset any of the relief that prospective homeowners would have received from those price declines. So I don't think there's been any change to increasing the affordability of home ownership. And what I'm really concerned about is that when young people cannot become homeowners, what happens is they remain renters longer. And we have a shortage of rental housing as well. And there's increased competition for rental units, and you've seen increases in rents across the country, and that's a serious concern. So again, we need to create more homes for Canadians to buy, but we also need to create more rental units for Canadians to live in across all price points, and that's really the key to restoring affordability to the housing market.
I guess my last question then is, when will the full suite of policy promises that have been laid out by the government to be enacted by CMHC, when will those actually start to have an effect?
So it's very difficult to answer that question because there are a large number of initiatives that the government has underway. The government has a lot of ambition with respect to housing policy, and CMHC is working incredibly hard with our partners behind the scenes to implement various programs. Some programs have an immediate impact. For example, the $500 housing benefit that'll come out later this year. But other things related to construction of housing takes time. Just by its very nature, housing construction is time consuming. So we have to, first of all, accelerate the process, but it's really important to take action now so that we can create housing for the future.
Romy Bowers, thank you very much for taking the time. This is a very enlightening conversation for me, and I hope for our audience at home. Best of luck to you.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure.